A tourist grabbed a royal guard's arm, thinking he was part of the entertainment. His unexpected reaction silenced her and earned the crowd's applause. A foggy morning shrouded Buckingham Palace in an atmosphere of majesty, seemingly unshakable. Yet with every passing moment, the sense of calm gave way to commotion. Tourists swarmed the square like ants, clicking cameras and debating the best angles for their photos. Amid the crowd stood a middle-aged woman who could easily be identified as a Karen. Her expression radiated determination, not the kind that commands respect, but rather the kind that spells trouble. She wore a strikingly bright coat that screamed, "I'm in charge here!" In her hands, she clutched a phone encased in a bulky, rhinestone-studded case that resembled a mini brick. She planted herself directly in front of one of the royal guards, a young man with an impenetrable expression. His poised stance and impeccably polished uniform demanded respect. He was as motionless as a statue, which seemed to annoy Karen. "Come on, smile!" she said loudly, almost laughing, making sure the crowd could hear her. "You're not a person. You're just a living decoration." The guard didn't flinch. Even his eyelashes remained still. The crowd stirred. Some chuckled, while others whispered, "That's the royal guard, not a circus act." Karen, however, seemed emboldened by what she imagined was a victory. In her mind, he was already about to break. She moved closer, stopping just short of the white line marking the boundary tourists were forbidden to cross. "I'm a tourist. I paid for this trip. Aren't you supposed to entertain me?" she sneered, treating the silent guard as if he were an actor who had forgotten his lines. The crowd began to split into two camps. Some, clearly offended by her behavior, whispered among themselves, "Who does that? It's so disrespectful." Others, armed with phones, saw it as the perfect spectacle. This video was bound to go viral. The guard, still as a statue, stood tall, exuding iron discipline. Yet there was something in his gaze, something Karen couldn't see, that hinted he was no stranger to such provocations. Oblivious to the disapproving glances, Karen persisted. "What if I come closer? What will you do?" she taunted, her laughter cutting through the square's quiet like an unwelcome joke in a library. She took a step, crossing the line, and the crowd froze. Even the air seemed to hold its breath, anticipating her next move. Sensing the crowd's eyes on her, Karen leaned into the attention. Her blue eyes sparkled with a mix of overconfidence and a desperate need for validation. "Well, look at this. I pay taxes, and this little soldier won't even smile," she declared loudly, though her accent betrayed that her knowledge of British taxes was as limited as her grasp of etiquette. The crowd buzzed. Someone with a phone giggled, recording her antics. "This has to go on TikTok," a teenager whispered to their friend, and they both laughed. The guard remained motionless, as expected. Yet his perfect posture, embodying dignity and discipline, seemed to irritate Karen even more. She inched closer, her shoes nearly touching the forbidden line. "Well then, what if I do this?" she said, reaching out to tug lightly at his sleeve. "Are you even real? Or are you just here for the photos?" The guard, maintaining his icy calm, tilted his head ever so slightly. This subtle gesture made more of an impression than any words could. His silent reproach was clear to anyone who valued tradition. "Oh, the robot cracked!" Karen shouted, her voice a jarring note in the square's symphony. Suddenly, a man's voice rang out from the crowd. "Stop this nonsense immediately! He's not a prop, he's a soldier!" exclaimed an elderly British man, visibly outraged by Karen's behavior. The crowd buzzed louder. Some cheered the man on, while others continued recording. Karen, reveling in the spotlight, laughed even louder. "Oh, come on, it's just a bit of fun," she retorted. But then she crossed the line, literally and figuratively. She reached out and grabbed the guard's arm. The audacious gesture shocked the crowd into silence. Even the clicking cameras seemed to pause. The guard didn't move, but when he spoke, his voice cut through the air like a thunderclap. "Step back behind the line!" The words were delivered so loudly and clearly that they echoed across the square, forcing even the most brazen onlookers to lower their phones. Karen instinctively stepped back, her face flushed. Yet instead of apologizing, she tried to play it off. "See? I told you he's real," she said with a shaky laugh, her voice trembling. The crowd murmured. "This is too much. Who does she think she is?" said a woman holding a small child. "They're not clowns. These people protect our country," added another tourist, a Brit, visibly outraged. Karen, however, refused to back down completely. Her arrogance and desire to prove her superiority remained, even as murmurs of disapproval grew louder. A nearby tourist muttered, "She just wants attention. It's pathetic." The guard, standing even straighter than before, resumed his stoic pose. Yet his silent presence carried an air of warning. Boundaries were not to be crossed, and consequences were inevitable. The crowd held its collective breath, waiting to see how this one-sided showdown would end. Just when it seemed Karen's insolence had reached its peak and the guard's patience its limit, the situation took an unexpected turn. Out of the crowd rolled a wheelchair. In it sat an elderly man dressed in a formal suit, his demeanor calm and dignified. In a soft, polite voice, he asked, "Excuse me, ma'am. Could you please move aside?" Karen shot him a glance full of irritation, as if he were intruding on her show. Her expression screamed, "Who do you think you are?" She rolled her eyes and scoffed loudly. "Wait your turn!" The remark sliced through the air, shocking the crowd into silence. And then, something extraordinary happened. The guard, who had remained steadfastly neutral, broke protocol. He stepped aside gracefully, his movement deliberate and commanding, and made way for the man in the wheelchair. The gesture was so unexpected that Karen momentarily lost her composure, but it didn't end there. The guard bowed his head slightly in respect and motioned for the man to approach the white line for a photo. The clarity of his action, combined with its humanity, sent a wave of emotion through the crowd. Applause erupted. The crowd cheered the guard, celebrating his dignity and grace. Karen, meanwhile, seemed utterly deflated. Her face flushed red as she stood frozen, her attempt to regain control rendered futile. "Respect," the guard said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his actions. The simplicity of the word resonated more deeply than any speech could have, and the crowd erupted into louder cheers. Karen stammered, trying to respond, but her voice was drowned out by the collective admiration for the guard. The man in the wheelchair smiled warmly, thanking the guard as he posed for photos. What had started as a moment of disrespect became a living lesson in honor and humanity. "Well, that's a master class in dignity. Respect tradition or leave," shouted a local, clearly angered by Karen's behavior. The once confident Karen now looked like a spotlight had been harshly turned on her. Her face was beet red, her gaze darting nervously. Even those who had previously recorded her antics were now lowering their phones, shaking their heads in disapproval. "Fine, I'm leaving," she muttered, trying to salvage her pride. Shrinking into herself, she hurriedly disappeared into the crowd. The guard, unfazed, calmly returned to his post. He adjusted his uniform, checked his bearskin hat, and resumed his perfectly straight stance. For him, it was as if nothing had happened. But for everyone else, it was a moment they wouldn't forget. Videos of the scene began circulating online within hours. Headlines like, "A lesson in honor from the Royal Guard," and "How to handle a Karen in 5 seconds," filled social media. Captions such as, "This is a must-see," and "When dignity is your strongest weapon," dominated comment sections. As the crowd dispersed, one man remarked to his companion, "This guard reminded us that some things can't be bought or demeaned. Honor, tradition, and respect." By the next day, the internet was buzzing with gratitude and admiration for the guard. Comments flooded in. "He wasn't just standing his post, he was defending tradition. That wasn't just a moment, it was a slap in the face to entitlement. Well done, guards, we're proud of you." The guard, still standing motionless, exuded the same unshakable majesty as always. A young boy passing by with his family looked up at him with awe and whispered to his mother, "When I grow up, I want to be like him." And perhaps that was the day's true victory.